Great. Well, please continue to add your where you're from and the organization in the chat, but let's go ahead and get started as we have a lot to cover in a very short amount of time. So again, welcome everyone to part two of our March Speed Learning series, Nonprofit Storytelling and Branding, Strengthening Your Website and Campaign Pages. Many of you joined us last week for part one, Website 101 for Nonprofits, Strategy, Structure, and Best Practices. And if you missed it, don't worry, or if you'd like to reference it again, it's available to watch on demand in our resource center. And my colleague Yulia, who is monitoring the chat today, she will share those links with you in just a bit. Thanks, Yulia. My name is Tara Peitzer, and I'm the Director of Marketing and Communications at GiveEffect. We help nonprofits raise more and build stronger connections with their supporters without being buried in manual work. We provide a 10-in-1 nonprofit software platform that automates fundraising, marketing, donor and volunteer management, operations, and so much more. So your team can focus on what truly matters, your mission. The goal of our monthly speed learning series is to provide practical, actionable insights from subject matter experts such as Whitney and Keith that we have with us here today so that you can immediately apply what you learn. And I'm so excited to welcome our guests, Whitney and Keith from the Connective Agency. So now I'll pass it over to you all to share a little bit about yourselves.
Yeah, thank you for having us. My name is Whitney McAnellen. I'm an Executive Vice President at Connective Agency, which is a boutique, fully integrated marketing firm based in Dallas. We support companies, organizations of all sizes, and nonprofits with anything from strategy through their branding, messaging, through website and ongoing marketing and communications efforts. So we're excited to be here today. We love working with nonprofits, and I really hope you guys take away something you can actually go take and use today.
Hi, thanks again for having us. My name is Keith Bates. I'm the Vice President of Digital Solutions for Connective Agency. My role is to help prepare and manage website development projects or any kind of digital platform implementation. So, kind of researching, looking into technical requirements for a project and, investigating, researching special functionality and seeing what platforms might be needed to help accommodate those goals for the project.
Thank you, Keith. Thank you, Whitney. So before we jump into today's conversation, I just wanted to kick it off by first sharing a little bit of the data that we were able to gather prior to this session. So thank you to everyone who answered the questions on the registration form. Just to remind you all, we asked, is your website telling your nonprofit story effectively? 22.5% of you had said yes, it's engaging and reflects our mission well. 22.5% of you also said, no, we struggle to tell our story in a meaningful way. And actually 55% of you responded as it does okay, but could be more compelling. And it's really interesting to see that only 22.5% of you feel like your website is effectively telling your nonprofit story. And that means that nearly 80% see room for improvement, which highlights just how important it is to refine your messaging and ensure your website reflects your mission in a clear and compelling way, and really why you're joining us today, right? Get some of those tips to implement. And the second question we asked you all on the registration form was, how well do your campaign pages integrate with your CRM to streamline donor engagement and storytelling? Again, about 50% were divided between not at all and seamlessly. And the rest of the 50%, or the next 50% of you all said somewhat. We use a CRM, but integration with our campaign pages could be smoother. And it's really interesting to see that over 75% are experiencing some level of disconnect. It's clear that there's a real opportunity to create smoother workflows and drive more effective follow-up with better donor engagement. So With that in mind, let's dive into today's conversation. Whitney and Keith, let's first level set. What is the primary goal of a campaign page and how does it differ from a general website
Yeah,
or website
when
page
you
rather?
Sure. I think when you're trying to plan your goals for a campaign page, you really just need to go back to your overall organization goals and how your campaign, be it a fundraising event or just a donation campaign, what are the goals of that? What do you want to achieve? And then do you need a separate page for that particular campaign? I think a campaign page is different than maybe your regular website because it's super focused on a specific goal in a finite amount of time. So whereas your main website, the donation page there is more open, evergreen, if you will. The campaign page is more focused and maybe only targeted to a certain subset of people.
I think that's really interesting. And just thinking about the differences between your web page, such as your homepage, and your campaign page, what are your thoughts on like the supporter journey, right? How would one supporter, or how would you intend for a supporter to navigate either to your website's homepage or to your campaign page? And what would you want that journey to look like when you think about, let's take a step back before we create these pages. What would, I guess, the intent be there?
Yeah, again, going back to your goals, like who are you, that supporter journey, how you want them to get to your campaign page. It really is focused on what your goals are. Who are we talking to? Who are those supporters we want to engage? What do we want them to actually do? And so there you can map out, all right, we actually need these people, we're targeting this group of people to sign up for a golf tournament. Okay, so you're going to have perhaps a campaign page. Maybe that's actually accessible from the website homepage as well, because it's an annual event. You always do. People expect it, and so they're going to go to your homepage and see that. Or if it's a very specific event and only maybe your top tier donors are invited, that might not be something that's accessible from your main website. It might be a little bit hidden and exclusive. So just understanding who it is and what the goals are, I think will really help you figure out where that page needs to be and what needs to be on the page.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. Right, like you would only want to not have the page be accessible if it was for a specific subset of your supporters. So for example, if you're doing a special campaign for only your members and you don't want others to see it or have the opportunity to join in on it, maybe that's not visible from your homepage, but otherwise having your campaign page be accessible for that supporter's journey is definitely important. So what are three key elements of strong branding or storytelling that every nonprofit should really incorporate into their website or campaign pages?
Great question. When, the three things that we need to think about as far as branding and storytelling go are first, that visual brand identity, your colors, your fonts, the iconography, those visual elements that you use in your brand, that should tie across all pages of your website and any external campaign pages you may spin up. Likewise, the second thing is that messaging. Part of your brand is your messaging, how you talk about your organization, how you talk about your campaigns. And that's, from vocabulary terms that are unique to you, that you adhere to, or even just the tone of voice. So that consistency as well. And third, I think, is just being very clear, very concise and compelling in how you structure the story. So the overall organization, who are you? What is the problem that you're trying to solve? Um, how can you bring that solution? How can your donors or supporters be part of that solution? Um, from an organization standpoint and that specific campaign. So that consistency of those three things really help tie your brand together and build trust.
Yeah, I think that element of trust is something so important, and I bet we're going to get into that into the next question as well, which is a great segue into what are three common mistakes nonprofits make on their campaign pages?
Yeah, a few common mistakes that we see might be, overcomplicating things a little bit when you try to cram a lot of messaging or a lot of content on one page. It can seem a little overly complex. So, going back to those three key things about your storytelling, who you are, what you do, the problem you're trying to solve, how your supporters can be part of that solution. Just keep it super simple, which sounds a lot easier than it is. So I think that's one of the mistakes that I see.
Yeah, just to add to that, in my years of experience in marketing, when it's your project, your baby, essentially, and you're so excited about it and you want other people to know all about it and be as excited as you are, sometimes you add too much to a page. You want to tell them everything about it. But to your point, being simple and just clearly explaining what your mission is or how they can support to help you achieve that mission in simple terms and
Mm.
not include like everything like the kitchen sink, right? Keith, we talked about it in our prep call for this session, but really being narrow and focused in order to clearly share your message in a way that others who are outside your organization can understand and help them then get to the next stage, which the action, right? A goal is to inspire action, right, on a campaign page, whatever your action is. So we'll get into that
Yeah,
in a minute.
yeah, and
Yeah.
I would add. Oh, sorry, Keith, go ahead, please.
Well, I was going to also say, we also tend to see that just the general optimization kind of, takes a back seat to things, especially when you're, in crunch time, you're trying to get things launched. It's very easy to kind of forget to, really step back, look at the mechanisms that you're using to drive people. And once they're on the page, so like the donation form, ensuring that that's really well optimized for obviously different devices, mobile and tablets, but also for people with disabilities. Um, Talked about that quite a bit in the last session, but ADA is really an important aspect these days, just ensuring that you're not alienating and then those with various disabilities. You want to make sure that that experience is optimized for them so that they can use it.
No, definitely, definitely. And one other thing I
Mm.
think that we should definitely chat about is I know this might seem small, or maybe if you are in a role where you're working on building the campaign pages, but you don't necessarily have a marketing or more technical background, is your URL, right? I know it might seem small, like maybe not everyone pays attention to it,
Yeah.
but think about the times that you've gone to a website from another page or from an email, and you look at that URL and you're like, wait a minute, am I sure I'm going to the right place? And we'll get into more detail on this when we talk about, the forms, but um, Keith and Whitney, what are your thoughts on what a campaign page URL should be or shouldn't be? Because I think that kind of falls under a very common mistake.
Uh, yeah, I'm sharing my screen real quick to show an example of what we're talking about. So this is a nonprofit, and they're called the Carnation Foundation. You notice at the top in the search bar here, it's carnationfoundation.org. If you click on the Purchase an Umbrella button here, this actually takes you out to a campaign page Excuse me, it's a little bit of a different, here we go. This is the page I want. If you notice in the URL, it changed to give.carnationfoundation.org. So this is actually hosted on the GiveEffect platform, but we're using a subdomain so that you have that consistency and people aren't alarmed by being sent to another website. I always look at that from emails that I receive. I look at who this is from, what the actual email address is. I'm always careful when I check links. I don't even click links in emails anymore. I go right to it myself. So people are very vigilant. And I think this is small but so important.
Right. And that's just one component of building trust with your supporter audience, right? Like going back to for a moment to the storytelling, because I think this is all connected when building trust, right? On your campaign page, and when you're telling the story of your mission, but also where your supporters' funds would go to, going back to just being clear in your messaging so people know when they're supporting your foundation, your organization, and your mission monetarily, that the funds are going to be used appropriately and to really serve the actual mission, right? So you have that element of storytelling and building trust with the copy or the multimedia on that campaign page. And then part of that again is the URL, making sure it matches and it's clear and it's not some random name and a whole bunch of numbers for another platform that you're shifting people over to, but that if you are using another platform, that it is white labeled to make it clear that you're where you should be and you can trust this site. So I think, that building trust through that supporter journey is really, really important. I think we touched on elements of that so far today, but I think that's just something that we should really emphasize. And whether you're using, just your website builder, or if you're using a platform like GiveEffect to build your campaign pages, I think that it's just really important to pay attention to those details, because if you don't build trust with your supporters, you're not going to have anything. There's no reason to even go further, right? That element of building trust is just so important. Wonderful. Winnie, Keith, anything else to add before we move on to our next section?
I would also just say being transparent, be upfront about what you're doing with the data that you're collecting. It's always good to have some kind of privacy statement or policy that the users can go and reference to see what's happening with that information. That really can help build confidence in the user and gain their trust. So that'd be one more thing I'd be sure to include.
Wonderful. So now let's quickly move on to the next section. And that is, so we've told our story, we've built trust on the campaign page. Now we need to drive that action with our call to action, right? So hopefully with the copy and the multimedia on a campaign page, we've inspired. But now how do we take it a step further? What types of call to actions tend to drive the most engagement, and how can we measure this?
Yeah, I think the types of calls to action that drive the most engagement, really, it depends on what your campaign goal is. So we use that term call to action a lot. That is the donate button, or the sign up to volunteer button, or buy a ticket to the event button, right? What you want people to do on the site. And that is not going to be successful unless you've primed folks with that initial messaging and storytelling, whether it's you in person at an event who's met someone and they've gone to your website to check you out. That's where that effort comes in, and that's what's going to determine the success of it. Once you've got the user on the site and they're going to engage with that call to action, I think making it very, very clear where they can click to donate very upfront, easy to access, take away any friction. Don't make people click into pages multiple times to find it or scroll. Don't make them scroll. So that user experience, I think will really help make it successful.
Wonderful. So now they've clicked on that call to action button, right? Donate here, sign up to volunteer, whatever it might be that you're trying to get your supporters to take action on, right? What would you say are the 3 best practices when it comes to a form, right? Whether it's a donation checkout form, or if you purchase an event ticket, the checkout form for that. What would you say are the 3 best practices when it comes to your checkout forms?
I would say first, take the time to make sure that you've styled the form so that it's consistent with your branding. You don't want any kind of disconnect because that can easily lose the user. They may lose that confidence. Try and keep the form short and simple. Don't overcomplicate it. Like what he was saying with just general navigation, don't make the user work too hard to get through this form. They want to give you their money, let them. And then just also ensure the form is secure and again, optimize. So make sure that you're testing it on different devices, that users can use it without any issue on their mobile devices. And then of course, assistive technologies for those with disabilities, ensuring that they can use that checkout form.
Yes, and one thing, and I think we here at Give Effect mentioned this a lot because it was just so surprising when we did some research on it, and that is that many platforms that you can build your checkout forms on, such as Give Effect, allows you to pre-check a box that indicates that your supporter covers your processing fees. Now, and with Give Effect, and I'm sure many other platforms have this too, if you have that box pre-checked, over the course of a year, you're going to have a substantial increase in the dollars that someone or your supporters are donating as a whole, because you have, those little increments of additional funds that would go towards paying the processing fees, but it can't be covered. And most of your supporters are willing to check that box. They just, maybe it's not there, or maybe they have to take that action to check that box. So if you have that box pre-checked, you'll really see the totals add up, especially over the course of a year. So we are short on time. These sessions are only 30 minutes, and so there's always so much to pack in. But we're going to do one last question before we head over to our audience submitted questions. So if you have any questions, please do submit it. But one thing I want to focus on is, right, so we told our story, we have our call to action button, which then connects to our checkout form, right? We're gathering information, we're getting that donation or that sign up to be a volunteer. Then we have this data. What is next? How do we streamline keeping in touch or taking any further actions with these supporters? And what are your best practices to streamline that?
Yeah, I think from a storytelling and planning and strategy process standpoint, to once you've got someone who's donated or taken action on your website, the supporter or audience journey doesn't end at the website. You really should map out, okay, what do we want to send people after they've donated? What do we want to send people if they've signed up to volunteer? Really having a clear plan of, do you want them to see the impact that they've made? Do you want them to feel the gratitude from your organization? And do you need them to be compelled to take action again in the future or every month in a recurring way? So map that out too. Once they've left your website, how do you stay in their world?
No, I think those are really good points. With only 3 minutes left of today's session, which If everyone's available to stay on a few minutes, we can try to get to more of the questions, but I do want to be conscious of everyone's time. So we did get a question from Jillian. If you can't yet afford a designed website, would you use Squarespace or Wix for best practices?
Ooh, I have a thought, and I know Keith, he might counter me on this. I say Squarespace.
I would agree with
You
Squarespace. Yeah,
agree? Okay.
totally. Yeah, totally. Yeah, yeah. Wix is decent, especially. Well, I don't know if they still do, but I know they used to have free options, but they're very, very limited. Squarespace tends to be a little more current in best practices and standards, especially at a technical level. They're not perfect by any means. And it's not going to be nearly as efficient than hiring an agency or someone that can do it properly, but um, I would say Squarespace would be your best option for that. Because they actually take a little care of making sure that their semantics, their code also is, again, ADA compliant, which is just so important. I can't emphasize that enough. And they give you a lot of flexibility in just the design. They have a pretty great WYSIWYG editor to allow you to just add any kind of layouts, regardless of how complex it is. So.
Yeah, I think there's so many platforms out there are just so easy for drag and drop editing, very intuitive. And Jillian, just because, I'm with Give Effect, of course, and I do believe in our product, I would definitely encourage you to take a look at Give Effect because you can build your website within Give Effect. And with the way our integration works between all aspects of our 10-in-1 platform is that, again, going back to those call to action buttons, your supporters are automatically added into your CRM for continued communications and relationship building. And so you really do get a 360 view of your supporters. So of course I have to plug us a little bit here because I truly do believe that you should consider it when deciding how to build your website and on what platform, including your campaign pages. Great, let's see. Here's a good question. How can nonprofits balance providing essential information with maintaining a clean, user-friendly design?
I think first of all, and you're going to hear me say this a lot, mapping your audience journeys. So you know what people you want them to see and think and actually take action to do. And then mapping out what each page of your site looks like what sort of content hierarchy you have, information hierarchy. So just even a sketch on a piece of paper or a PowerPoint slide to say, okay, I want an image here and I want some text here. You start to see the balance. It's really layout design. You start to see the balance of the content. And I think people learn in different ways. So using written word, using videos, audio, graphics and visual elements all kind of appeal to different modalities. So you're telling a story through different methods, and people who skim text might catch it just as easily as if someone had read it deeply.
And I think you touch on a really great point, Whitney. Mapping your data, right? I think we could do a complete session or even a full month series on mapping your data and making sure you're collecting that data and then automating it to where it goes into your CRM. But now you've collected all this data. Okay, what are you doing with that, right? So how can you automate that follow-up and relationship building? And we touched on that a little bit today with, integrating your CRM with your campaign pages, but I think we'll have to do another session about going deeper into then personalized communications using things like merge fields in order to send very personalized emails at scale. And I know Give Effect does this. I'm sure many other platforms do this as well, but I definitely encourage all the organizations joining us today to look into when you're creating your website, the full supporter journey from coming to your website in general or to a specific campaign page to taking that action, whether it's to sign up to donate or sign up to volunteer. And then once you gather that information or that payment is made, then what? How are you keeping track of this to report on it? And also, how are you continuing to engage with your volunteers and your donors month over month, year over year, to really continue to build that relationship and really serve your mission? And it looks like we are 3 minutes over time. So I just want to take a moment to thank our guests, Whitney and Keith, for joining us today, as well as all the attendees here today who are able to join us live. Just a couple quick things. Please do stay in touch with us. And my colleague Yulia has shared contact information in the chat. And if anyone is interested in learning more about GiveEffect, please let us know. There is a survey, just a very quick 2-question survey. When you leave, we hope you'll fill that out. And then I definitely invite you to join us for April's speed learning sessions. We're going to be covering QuickBooks Online for nonprofits. So we're going to have 2 sessions, a 101 and a 102. So my colleague Yulia did share the link to register in the first session on April 10th in the chat, and the invites will also be included in the follow-up from this session. So thank you again to our guests, Whitney and Keith, and thank you to all of you for joining us today. And with that, we'll see you next time.
Thank you for
Thank
having
you.
us.